The developer behind the latest entries to the Pokémon franchise may finally be righting the wrongs of their past, but in reality they may have actually made things a whole lot worse. Brexit means Brexit, but does Dexit mean Dexit? Here to discuss it with me is Mr. Gareth Evans, fanatical Pokemon fan, right? You love Pokemon.
Absolutely. Love the genre. Play
We're
it every
crazy
day.
about Pokemon.
Yay.
Let's just get that out of the way up front. Neither of us are particularly crazy about Pokemon, but this is an interesting story, and I think the fan base is kind of divided on it, so we'll see where you land as a viewer. Make sure to let us know in the comments.
One thing I do know about Pokemon is that Game Freak just aren't making enough money. They're just not making enough money. They're paupers, these game developers. They just don't make anything, do they?
I mean, only, 100 million? Only 200 million?
We will get into that.
So anyway, we're here to talk about some Pokemon monetization missteps, perhaps, because last night there was a Nintendo Direct, or more accurately, a Pokemon Direct. It was all about Pokemon. And some of the stuff they mentioned was about some new expansions for the current games in the series, Pokémon Sword and Pokémon Shield. And in case you don't know how Pokemon work, they normally release two games that are pretty much the same, but each one they'll have a few unique Pokemon, a few special legendary ones that you can only get in one particular
versions,
game.
Yeah.
But other than that, they're exactly the same.
And they do that just because.
I feel like
just because
they've
always
tricked
done that.
people that that's a cool thing to do, but even when they were doing it in the 90s with the originals, it's the same game. They're just doubling their potential profits.
Yeah.
It's a smart marketing move, but it's not necessarily the most consumer-friendly thing. But anyway, so there's going to be an expansion pass, which will get you access to the two new DLC packs, which are called the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra. But it's really important to note that if you've got Pokemon Sword, you have to pay for the two expansions, and if you've got Pokemon Shield, you also have to pay for the two expansions. They don't cross over. So in theory, if you've got both games, you're going to have to pay for 4 expansions. You've got to pay for 2 expansion passes.
Additional purchases.
Yeah. But anyway, so a brief outline of what the thing is. The Isle of Armor is coming out in June this year, 2020, and adds a new region that's all focused on nature, so it's going to feature different environments like swamps and caves and stuff like that. Whereas the Crown Tundra will be out in fall 2020, so that's around, September, October, November time, and we'll add a new region focused all about snow, i.e. a frozen tundra, and we'll have a lot of exploration and kind of tombs to explore, and apparently a brand new co-op mode. The most interesting thing to come out of this is that there's also going to be a technically free update, which is going to add a bunch of the old Pokemon that they didn't have time to add in. About 200 old Pokemon will be available in these new regions, but it's a bit complicated about how you can get them, and there's an argument about whether or not this is paywalling to be able to get the Pokemon, because if you don't buy the expansions, you technically can't go into these areas because you haven't paid to access them, so you can't get the old Pokemon that you always wanted.
Yeah, they're adding them to the base game, but you can only get them in the base game if you trade them. Now, trading is the only way that you can get these new Pokemon. So, yes, you can get the Pokemon, but you can't go out in the wild and get them because you can't get access to the areas which they are in because that's the DLC content.
And trading has always been a huge part of the Pokemon community, but personally, I've never quite understood it. Surely you want to go and catch them yourself, but that's just me. As I said, I'm not really a fan. And you can trade locally with another person, so one of you will have to buy the thing, one of the two of you, or you can trade online, but trading online requires the Nintendo Online subscription, which costs about $19.99 or £17.99 for a year's subscription. So that's still a pay barrier you've got to get through.
That's true.
It may not be an entire wall, but maybe like a prickly hedge full of thorns, something still just as unpleasant to get through.
Exactly.
Or there's a new feature called Pokemon Home, which is a cloud service, and now that's a service where you can share Pokemon across a bunch of different games and stores up to 3,000 different Pokemon. And it's compatible with a bunch of different games, including Pokemon Go, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, Pokemon Sword, Pokemon Shield, and the Pokemon Bank, which was kind of its predecessor and was available on the Nintendo 3DS as like an expansion app. And that included Pokemon X, Pokemon Y, Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, Pokemon Sun and Moon, and then the Ultra versions of Sun and Moon. Now, the Pokemon Bank was a paid service, and it was about $5 or £4.50 a year, which doesn't sound too unreasonable, but it's still a pay barrier you've got to get through. And there's a question of whether or not Pokemon Home will be the same, because I think it's a bit unclear whether it's a paid service or not, because they've not really given many details.
Yeah, everyone's assuming that it will be a paid service because, they like to make money.
Such is the modern world, yeah.
Well, it is Pokemon, and they do like to make money. So how they've handled this expansion thing is new for the Pokemon series. How they've handled it in the past, for example, example, with a Pokemon Sun and Moon, which was out in 2016. What they did was they released an Ultra version of the game the very year later, which included like extra bits. You could say it was just like an add-on pack, but it was like more like a definitive remake of the game that came out a year later, essentially. So to get all the content from Pokemon Sun and Moon, you bought the base games initially this was on the Nintendo DS, obviously. $40 each for the games, so that's $80 for Sun and Moon. And then the definitive versions or the Ultra versions came out next year, again costing $40 each. So for a total of $160 for all the content of that. Well, two versions of two games that could arguably just be one game with just one big update. So $160 isn't that a lot of money?
And this is the thing, I think Nintendo have done an amazing job of sort of hoodwinking the fan base into thinking this is cool. It's just the way it goes.
Oh no, but calm down. This time it's a lot cheaper. It's cheap. It's $30 each for $30 each. But hang on a minute. The base games for Sword and Shield were $60 each this time because it's on the Switch now. It's not a DS thing. It's not a kids thing. Switch is for $60 is fine. So that's $120 for all the content in this game. And remember that it's this about 20 hours worth of gameplay if you rush through it on each of those. So it's like 40 hours plus. But if you're a completionist, you want to catch them all, maybe you get more out of that. But that's $120 for around 40 hours of gameplay. Doesn't seem like great value to me. And now they're asking for $30 for each of the expansions, which makes $180 total for all the content in these games. Again, arguably a single game with just an expansion pass. I don't get it. Like, do Pokemon players just accept that they're going to get ripped off and they don't even bother shouting about it anymore? Because that is a lot of money for what doesn't seem like a lot of
That's
game.
the thing. I think a lot of people have just kind of come to accept it, and if you do accept it, that's fine. You know, do what you want. But to me, that it's bananas. Just it's bonkers that there's that much money for a game that's not really changing that much. I mean, these new regions might be amazing. It might be completely revolutionary, but these new regions aren't exactly going to add new mechanics or a whole new way of looking at the game. It's just going to be a bit more extra content, which might be enough for you.
No, maybe the Pokemon players just aren't quite as frugal or as money conscious as us.
Maybe.
And they just got money coming out of their ears. I don't know. I mean, I don't really know a lot of Pokemon players, but a lot of people are still buying it. And Sword and Shield was the most successful Pokemon game launch yet. We're selling a massive 6 million units worldwide in the opening weekend, according to Nintendo. They were boasting about it. That's $360 million just in a weekend at launch. Let that settle in. It's like 1/3 of $1 billion, and they couldn't even be bothered to put all the Pokemon in there.
Exactly. This was a game that a lot of people weren't happy with. A lot of people really were, but as often there is sometimes the most negative voices are the loudest, and a lot of people really weren't happy. And these were the people calling it Dexit and the Dexiteers, which was hence the terrible pun in the beginning. So a lot of fans were very unhappy at the launch of the game and kind of in the build-up to launch, because Game Freak, the developers, announced that the in-game Pokédex wouldn't feature every single Pokemon there's ever been there in the past. And it's not been a thing for a little while, apparently. A couple of the previous games haven't included every single Pokemon, but people are still really annoyed about it. So much so that I recently discovered an Imgur gallery full of mock-ups of different Pokemon and their evolutions and different generations and stuff, where they're all crying because they're sad that they've been cut out of the game. So do you feel guilty now, Game Freak? Do you? They're crying. Their tears are on your hands.
It's you and me. I know it's my destiny, Pokemon.
And the reason why they didn't include all the Pokemon is because they wanted to focus on new content going forward. They wanted to look to the future and not just have to bring in all these old Pokemon, because there's like over 800 of them now and they're adding more all the time. So to start again, having to remake all those assets from scratch for the new platform, which was the Switch, would have taken too much resources from them. They said, we can't do it. We can't make all these from scratch. However, someone on Reddit outed them by leaking a screenshot of them actually reusing old assets from the older versions of Pokemon. And that got people angry, and then the hashtag Game Freak lied was born, and then hashtag Dexit, everything, everyone was pissed.
Things got a bit out of hand there, and there are obviously the horrendous people who start sending death threats, which no one endorses or anything like that. But for some fans, adding in these Pokemon, whether or not you want to buy the expansions and go and access them, or if you're willing to get them through trading, that might make you happy. But it still doesn't change the reused assets and some of the more fundamental problems with the game. And a lot of bugs apparently have been fixed, but there's still plenty in there, and some texturing issues and whatnot, which people have been saying were problems. So this does take steps to amend, but is it really enough for you as a player? I want to know your opinion if you're a Pokemon fan. Is the payment to access these expansions a barrier, or will trading be good enough, because in my mind, my understanding of when I played Pokemon as a kid, trading never entered my mind. I wanted to catch them all. It's not got to trade them all, it's got to catch them all and do what it says on the box.
Gotta catch 'em all.
But anyway, in another Pokemon-related story, Pokemon Go, the mobile version of the game, the mobile spin-off augmented reality app, which I'm sure you've all played, just had its biggest year for player spending ever. And there's a little graph here which is provided by an app analyst group called Sensor Tower. And the game reportedly generated, when it launched in the summer of 2016, $832 million in player spending. So that's on microtransactions, buying extra Pokeballs and incubators and all that kind of stuff. So a huge drop of about 29% in 2017 before a rise of about 38% in 2018, and that was kind of when people fell off the game because there wasn't enough content, and then they started adding a bunch of content back in. Then finally, in the last year just gone, 2019, it reached a peak of 894 million, and that's about a 7.5% increase from 2018. So it's technically bigger than it ever was, but hold on to that because I'll get there in just a sec. Makes it the 5th top earning game of 2019 behind Honor of Kings, which is the huge Tencent League of Legends-esque mobile game. It's hugely popular in China, which is the number one, which earned about 1.5 billion all on its own.
Wow.
So just let that simmer for a moment. So the success of Pokemon Go is thanks to quite consistent content updates, adding in new Pokemon and features. A lot of it was stuff that probably should have been in there in the first place because it was very barren to begin with, but they've got it to a point now where it's a much more enjoyable game. And its lifetime earnings are at around 3.1 billion, and average earnings per download is about $5.70. So the average player spends about $5.70 on in-game microtransactions and stuff. But what is really important to note is that the game launched in July of 2016, so only had 6 months to accumulate that huge 832 million. Now in 2019, it's accumulated what sounds like a bigger number, 894 million, but that's in the whole year. That's 12 months. So they've effectively had double the amount of time to do that. And it's still very much the case that the biggest period for the game was when it launched between July and September, and that's unlikely to be beaten.
It's a different beast, Pokemon Go.
It really is.
It's a free-to-play mobile game, so if they're making enough microtransactions, I mean, they've made a couple of billion already just off that game in the 3.5 years since its launch. They're doing all right, and I don't begrudge them that. They've been successful. They're not charging anything outright.
Yeah, when I played it, I don't remember the microtransactions being particularly egregious. Acquiring Pokeballs by yourself by visiting stops was really easy. It might have changed now, no idea, but
it's always take it or leave it for me. But in terms of how much money this franchise is making and how much they're asking people, that's the question, right? It's just the sheer amount of money that they're making. I mean, obviously, I'm outside of this franchise. I'm not angry about the price of these because it's the status quo though, right? And people are just accepting it, whether it's blindly or not, or whether they're realizing that they're charging a shit ton of money for each of these installments. Other companies might just release one game, they wouldn't split into two, and then they'd have like maybe even a free expansion pass or just a small paid expansion or something. So it's even half the price compared with what Pokemon are charging for Sword and Shield plus the expansion passes. So you're talking maybe $90 what a regular company would charge, but lo and behold, they are charging $180 for this time around. It's like, dude, what I'm interested in as an observer looking in is, do people not realize that this is a shit ton of money, and why aren't people angry about that?
Yeah, like if you're willing to pay it, that's on you. I'm not going to say that you shouldn't buy it. Like it's totally your choice, but to me, that's a staggering amount of money to spend on something that doesn't seem like that much of a change.
Well, and the value for money proposition is always the thing for me. So the gameplay in the base games of Sword and Shield are like 40 hours, right?
Yeah.
So Pokemon Sword and Shield, $120, 40 hours. It's just I don't know. I'm outside of this. Why don't you educate me down in the comments?
Please do, because we are very uneducated. We are just stupid idiots on the internet. But anyway, please let us know down those comments. We will definitely go down and have a look, see what you guys think. But that is it for this video. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and of course the bell. We'll see you next time. I've been Henry, he's been Gaz. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.